Thank you very much. Rather than do podium speakers on the other side, I think we'll kind of treat this as more of just a discussion down here. I will walk through and introduce each speaker. They'll take a few minutes to speak to whatever slides they brought, and then we'll get into the questions. Just a little background, as Alyssa mentioned, our firm is a research and strategic consulting firm based in Boston. We've worked with just about everybody domestically on the carrier side, lots of colo, as well as a lot of due diligence on the finance side in the many acquisitions that have been going on over the last few years. And we've been doing this since 1991, so we feel pretty well entrenched in the marketplace. Up first, we have Jeff Bonja, the wireless solutions engineer from Corning. Jeff, take it away.
Hi there, thank you for coming. My name is Jeff Bonja. I'm a solution engineer for the eastern half of the country, supporting primarily the enterprise side of the house, but also doing a lot of the, supporting a lot of the carrier and tower company projects. Corning acquired Mobile Access a number of years ago, really is investing heavily in delivering really that infrastructure from layer one up to deliver the bits and bytes to the end user via whatever mechanism that works the best.
Excellent. Next we have Bill DelGrego. First, I think you're going to have to explain your nickname and then proceed with your slides.
Yeah, I flew fighters in the Air Force for 27 years, so that name came, and I'll have to kill you all if I tell you what it means. So, I think the key here is when you're talking about networks now, you know, our company being a neutral host, third-party provider, originally started as a DAS company, first outdoor, and then in about 2007 timeframe indoor, and it was DAS focused. But the technologies are all changing, and we consider ourselves a distributed network company now. And so you see some of the technologies and things that are on the bottom of that. And so the discussion today with you know, combining Wi-Fi and neutral host systems, including small cells and other things, for the indoor space, you know, is what we're hearing from our customers, both from venue owners, you know, in every vertical, hospitals, healthcare, sports and entertainment, commercial A, Class A space, and, you know, tenants and things that want to know, should I still do my own Wi-Fi, or is the building owner providing some of that? So the dynamics there, we're starting to get asked the question, hey, when you put your DAS in or your neutral host system in, could you also put the Wi-Fi in? And there are obviously some synergies there in labor costs and things that can happen. So we'll talk about that as we go.
Thank you very much. Up next, actually, we have Mike. I think your slides are not in here, so Mike Collado of Solid, you verbal only introduction.
Verbal only. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Mike Collado, I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Solid, where we keep people connected and safe in a rapidly changing world through a portfolio of RF amplifier, RF radio, and optical transport solutions. Translation, we're talking about DAS, backhaul, front haul, solutions like that. Some of our projects include the Seoul Metro, the Daytona International Speedway, Amazon headquarters, Ronald Reagan building, and in our own backyard here in New York City subway, 432 Park Avenue, Lincoln Tunnel, terminals 4 and 5 in JFK. We were really excited about the opportunity to join this panel because we have this industry discussion about it's a toolkit approach for densifying the network. And we see that a lot of the industry likes to look at an either or, as Alyssa mentioned in her opening remarks. And I think it begs the question, why not use all the tools in the kit? And particularly Wi-Fi, and most of us kind of come from a cellular background. You know, Wi-Fi is very unaffectionately known as the garbage band. And yet it's a tool that somewhat in the public begrudgingly the wireless operators are saying, yeah, we're looking at doing that. And so it is an important element of the toolkit. And you know, one other thought, you know, before we move on, is that the toolkit needs to, in order to keep pace with the needs of the market, needs to both, we need to identify both evolutionary and revolutionary strategies and technologies in order to get there. And I think we'll unveil in this discussion some of the things that are happening on the DAS side and on the Wi-Fi side within the market that show that. And then one final thought is wanted just to take a quick opportunity. Solid has been involved with NEDAS very early on, from Ezra's original vision, and it's really gratifying seeing how this event, how this organization has continued to make inroads and bring people, really the smartest in the industry, together for social events, some of these thought leadership events. And so really kudos, great job to Alyssa and her team, and kudos for all of you coming out and supporting this great event. So thank you. Glad to be here.
Hear, hear. Last but definitely not least, Chintan, Fafadia, Director of Business Development Northeast for PCTEL.
So thank you for this opportunity. I'm glad to be here. We have been involved with NEDAS for almost for 2.5 years now since so PCTEL, just want to tell a little bit about PCTEL and then come to the topic. PCTEL, as most of you might know, we are into test and measurement, both products and services. Quite a few people here, we work with you, and we want to work with every one of you. So that's our aim as PCTEL, because we call ourselves where you need products, you can come to us. So in terms of our products, we do test and measurement products where scanning receivers are our main test and measurement product suite. Combines of scanning receiver, you have data collection tools, we have interference hunting tools, we also have network analytics, and next slide please. And in terms of services,
There's my slide.
in terms of services, we provide test and measurement services in the DAS in-building and DAS industry, and not only focus on in-building but also outdoors. But we go through the spectrum and the life cycle of the network, starting from design to all the baseline benchmarking, CW, and then commissioning and system verification. So we try to cover the entire spectrum of services as well. And coming to the topic today, it's a very interesting one, that discussing about DAS and Wi-Fi. People always consider Wi-Fi as another capacity adding solution. Yes, it inherently helps you get more capacity, but also want it to be cheap. So it's a good discussion that if people want it for free, DAS comes with a cost. So I think with the questions that we have and the points we'll discuss will help us evolve towards what is the right solution for the industry right now.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Like I gave the one guy who has notes the handheld mic. So starting out, Mike, we'll let you lead off. You mentioned the either or. Just to lay some groundwork, what are the inherent advantages individually of a DAS system versus a Wi-Fi implementation?
Yeah, sure. So, DAS is sort of a tried and true method for densifying the network inside medium to large buildings. So it's known by the industry. Very little interference issues. Works well with the macro network. It's ultimately, in spite of certain arguments, a cost-effective solution for doing that. Wi-Fi unlicensed spectrum, of course, on the other hand, again, coming back to DAS, is the support for multiple operators on generally a single infrastructure and neutral host system. Wi-Fi is a cost-effective way for bringing in capacity. DAS traditionally has been viewed as coverage. Wi-Fi is capacity, and I think once we get further into the discussion and look at more of the evolutionary and revolutionary approaches, we'll see that the lines are blurring a little bit and why they coexist. But ultimately, yeah, Wi-Fi and DAS, you see this at stadiums, you see this at college campuses. They coexist very well, as Bill could probably talk to as well.
Yeah, Bill, is that combination rapidly becoming basically the standard for be it in-building or campus-type implementation?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it, a rapid combination of, what's happening, but in the sports and entertainment realm especially, so if we've done the Barclays Center and Florida Marlins Stadium, Dunkin' Donuts Center up in Rhode Island, things like that, the combination of the two make complete sense because then there's some economics that can be involved in it, right? There's liability piece to Wi-Fi, as you can imagine, because you're all users, right? You always have to accept those terms and conditions, and there's a reason for that, because obviously if somebody hacks through a Wi-Fi unlicensed realm and does something, takes your bank account information, whatever, somebody's got to figure out who's liable for that. So if we put a network in, what is it that we're doing, and how are we using the two systems together to do that? So the DAS part of it, or the neutral host part of it, being FCC licensed, somewhat secure, because we're the pipe for that network. It hasn't been there, but the Wi-Fi opens up the what I'll call the wild, wild west of all these things that you have to be considered, including interference and et cetera. You know, if you haven't gone online yet and seen, for example, the AT&T build of Dallas Cowboy Stadium, and while it's a competitor and all that stuff, it's pretty interesting because there's, you know, multiple thousand of nodes now. I mean, you're literally sitting on a Wi-Fi antenna, or it's in the rail that you're walking down to, and then of course the number of sectors in that facility to make sure that 80, 90, whatever thousand people have capability, you know, is quite remarkable. And I can tell you from our perspective, with starting in the sports and entertainment, you know, we go by requirements for what a Verizon or AT&T or Sprint or T-Mobile needed in that venue. They didn't even realize what was going to happen. And so the initial builds on a lot of these sports and entertainment facilities were not adequate because people started bringing their iPods or iPads and using their phones, you know, to send video and all these other things. The next thing you know is there's not enough sectors, there's not enough capacity. And still today, I guarantee many of you are going to sports events and not having what you desire. And so that's leading to this crash of, hey, what can we do with Wi-Fi? Because we can offload some of that capacity problem to the Wi-Fi while the DAS does what it does. So it's an interesting, you know, change. And we're even in my world where I'm kind of responsible for all verticals, including the Class A space. We're now getting REIT owners asking us, should I have you guys put in the Wi-Fi in my common areas, et cetera, while we build this DAS? They're asking that question. And obviously there's some advantages because that union labor here in Manhattan, we might as well use it once and lay the cable and put in the access points and all that stuff versus doing one build and then doing another build and all those costs going up. So it's all happening in our world that we have to consider how are we going to approach it from a, you know, a commercial perspective. So it's out there and it's a very interesting dynamic.
That's interesting to hear building owners making a concerted effort to implement things that inherently benefit their tenants, but will cost them money. Is that something you're all seeing? Historically, I know there's been a lot of concern where, be it DAS or Wi-Fi, the expectation from building owners is that a carrier or someone else should be paying for that, not themselves.
I mean, I'm starting to see that, you know, the building owners are recognizing that it's a cost of doing business. It's a cost of entry. The people down the street are offering it as an amenity, so now I have to offer it as an amenity, and it's growing. I've been evangelizing for DAS in the enterprise for probably about 6-8 years, and I remember when I first went in, people would roll their eyes saying, yeah, nobody's going to care about this. And now, you know, you have hospitality operators saying, I need to have this here because my clients are going to go down the street because my cell phone doesn't work or my Wi-Fi is not good enough. So it is definitely becoming recognized. It's going to take time. And as the technology evolves, as things become easier, I think you'll see a much better adoption.
We're seeing it in the commercial real estate world, the innovative and creative and those that are looking for value in their portfolios, you know, so REITs that turn over, you know, they have 7 funds or whatever they have, and they need to turn over that portfolio. So they buy a set of buildings that need improvement. They put the X dollars into each building, and part of that improvement is to say, so then how do I lease this new building product up? And they want to have the best technology ratings. So you'll think, you know, many of you may know about Wired Score, or it used to be called Wired NYC. So they're, like we started in the LEED world with sustainability, calling the LEED Gold, the LEED, all that. Now we're doing it with the technology in the building. And that's affecting whether you get the Google tenant or you get the old school tenant that just wants to use landlines in their phone. And that creates differences in the cost you can get per square foot. So the intangible amenity of cellular and Wi-Fi all working, you know, harmoniously together is creating value for those REIT owners. And they're the ones that are hearing about it, the managing directors and those folks that I speak with at the asset manager level are getting it. And they're starting to say, okay, how do I do this? And how do I do it in a way that adds value to my buildings but doesn't cost me so much?
And it's not only the commercial building owners, even the residential building owners have started focusing on it because it makes a difference. It makes a difference to everyone who's coming into the building, whether it's an apartment building or a condominium complex. you want to market it that you have the coverage that is required in the building. So that helps in getting tenants or clients, and everyone is recognizing things. Obviously, commercial building owners have been on this bandwagon a little earlier than the residential ones, but everyone is getting on that.
So just to add to that point before we move on is I saw some ABI research recently that shared that in what I like to call the middle ground, the enterprise space, only worldwide 2% of that is being covered by in-building wireless. So it's an enormous opportunity that informs that not only a technical but also a business use case, they need to be perfected and to be able to successfully address this space.
That makes a good point, and obviously building owners are often behind, and this technology moves very fast. When you are positioning this to property owners, how do you ensure at least a certain degree of future-proofing, or what do you do to ensure that, to give them at least 10 years, let's say, without having to go back and rip everything out and start over again? Chintan, is there anything you can do to address that?
We generally come into the face after our customers have pitched in, but I assume that they are making in the pitch where they can provide them a longevity of the system, because yes, stadiums and everything they evolve much quickly because you have 80,000-90,000 people coming in at the same time and you want to meet the capacity. But building owners, they cannot do things again and again. So obviously the proposals have to include all the carriers. Hopefully you can get all the operators in there and try and see from a frequency point of view that if you can have everything in the same fiber, then that helps out. So I'm assuming that's the way it's been proposed. Probably Mike can speak more on that one.
Yeah, I think that so from our perspective, we've never had a system be the way we've architected our system and our solution. We've never had a rip and replace of a solid system. But looking forward, particularly for that middle ground space, I think there are three keys to success. It's about reduced total cost of ownership. It's about flexibility, meaning the ability to add multiple services and technologies over that infrastructure, and then intelligence. And those are the things that certainly OEMs, I think us sitting up on the panel, are looking at, are actively developing in order to address and deliver those three things.
Yeah, a company like ours, we have to deploy a system that's going to be upgradable over the next 20 years. Our mindset is because we design, own, operate, maintain it for 10 years plus 5 if we can. That's the ultimate goal, so the economics work out with the current environment, with where we are, with what these things cost. So we actually, tell our venue owners, our network will not be the cause of an upgrade not happening. So because they look at us and go, wow, 10 years and then 15, we're going to be on 9G, not 4G, but we're going to be on 9G by then. What does that mean? And so we educate them on the industry and say, look, 5G is when is 5G? You tell me. 2019, 2020, I don't know. But the other thing that the world has done, which has been much better than when we started indoor DASs, where we put a 2G or an older system in, a lot of those had to be ripped out, right? They didn't meet the standards of what's going on. But there's been great coordination among people. Your 4G phone works at 3G, right? And the 5G phone, when it comes out, it's going to work at 4G for a long time. So you can tell your owners that even though Verizon puts out 5G in 2019, what are they going to do first? They're not going to come to your little 400,000 square foot building and give you the 5G equipment, right? They're going to go outside and start working on the major metropolitan outdoor networks, and then maybe 2 years later it'll show up in a building. But the point is that we have to be secure in the way we build the network, that when it does come to that owner's building 8 years from now, our network isn't going to stop that happening. And so we actually guarantee an upgrade for no cost to them, as long as the carrier comes to the table. So it's dynamic, but you have to do that because these are 10-year plus deals, even though they're going in their mind, technology changes every 18 months is what I always was taught, but here we are. So it's an education for those that are not, like many of us in the room, that understand what's kind of going on in the industry.
I think back 10 years ago, and I can't even imagine the differences, where we are today. And a lot of that is that infrastructure, making sure you're pulling in hardware, and all of that connectivity that has the
Additional
bandwidth,
fiber.
the connectivity, you know. And we can take a page really from the structured cabling world, because they've been struggling with that. You know, we've been going from Cat 3, we're at 6, 7, 8 or something at this point. I'm sorry, I work for a fiber company. I don't keep up with that as much anymore. But the reality of it is that layer 1 infrastructure that is universal. And really to then even get to that layer 2. And that's really what we're doing with what we're here right now, DAS and Wi-Fi. This is a layer 2 platform. Everything is becoming primarily data. So to then have different applications that we may not know what they're going to be today, but to have that layer 2 that those things can plug into later on, that's the best way to defend against it. So, you know, we've got AC coming out right now. I mean, that was a challenge to have to run 6A or whatever out to 25 or 50 foot grids. AD will be out after that. You know, all of these technologies, again, make as robust of an infrastructure as you can today.
That makes sense. And in terms of flexibility and longevity, DAS does offer a pretty high degree of that, not to mention, I mean, have you ever been able to position it as a public utility or something from a right-of-way standpoint? Are there advantages to the sort of universal applicability of it that it has over Wi-Fi?
I've seen, you know, some residential, high-end, high-rise buildings look at it as, you know, part of the condo fee, part of that infrastructure that, you know, the residents see it as an amenity that's worthwhile. You know, that may still progress down.
One of the steps we have to get over in negotiation with venue owners is the assignment issue. Right? These are REIT owners that want to sell buildings. They don't want to encumber their building with any problem child that could stop a sale. So, you know, they look at us and they say, well, we have to be able to kick you out. And so economics are based on 10 years and 15, and we can't allow them to say, you know, hey, your Starbucks store is closed because the new owner doesn't want a Starbucks store in your building, i.e. DAS, and you're gone. So we have to discuss, well, wait a minute, are you going to kick out the water in your building? Are you going to kick out electricity in your building? Are you going to shut the air conditioning off because you have a contract with the elevator company? Or, you know, on and on and on. And once you get, again, you're hearing what I'm saying, there's a lot of education of what this is so that they get that, no, you don't have to worry about it. It's a very simple process. And we've had many buildings sell and our stuff's still there. So. But it can be a sticking point. We've lost deals because the owner will not agree to that. And obviously, you put a couple $1 million in the building, you can't be told to leave a year later. It's not going to work. So. There's
been a lot of excitement around small cell, and obviously the model of small cell, traditional small cell is evolving a bit more towards a front hall, hoteling type model in a lot of places. Does the DAS Wi-Fi combination present a real threat to the small cell implementation plan, or are they complementary? Could one supplant the other?
I mean,
go ahead.
I feel they are complementary because it's depending on, every venue is different. So the need for every venue is different. You're not going to satisfy each and every venue with the same solution. So at some places, you might have DAS Wi-Fi and small cells too, because depending on the location, I mean, you want to cover a stadium and something that is just outside the stadium, then you might want to put I'm sorry, that might not be a right example because you cover it by DAS, but there are locations where you can have a small cell next to it, and they are complementary. So I don't see them as mutually exclusive. They will complement each other, all the three technologies.
Yeah, the point I was going to make, and I think that's an excellent point. As we say, it's a toolkit approach. Every venue, every situation, all the requirements are unique, and so that informs of the right mix of the tools from the kit. But I recall a discussion I had with Ken Rabin, who's analyst at 451 Research, who shared a concern that in the enterprise space, that the prospect of voice over Wi-Fi as a strategy that the carriers will adopt to ensure coverage inside the buildings, that could be voice over Wi-Fi quality good enough for the enterprise, for an office space, and that could be a real threat actually to the wide-scale deployment of small cells going forward. If small cells are positioned to be an ideal solution for that space. Kind of an interesting data point.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, just from a data standpoint, the Wi-Fi per meg's considerably cheaper too. So that was my thinking, is that there's a lot, billions of dollars being poured into stuff that there might be some cheaper solutions out there. In terms of the shortcomings of this structure, obviously Wi-Fi handoff is still not a perfected science. Where have there been venues where you felt this was not, or verticals or types of businesses like maybe hospitals where there's a lot of sensitivity and mobility, or financial services, towards your point about having unlicensed spectrum in a building, if you're handling sensitive information, that becomes a bigger concern.
Yeah, I still think it's a cultural thing too. You know, there's the security aspect that tenants want to do it their own way, whether they're a hospital or they're a JP Morgan Chase Financial on 3 floors of a commercial building. Their attitude is they need to control that, and they need to know what security is going on with it. And so if you're going to end up doing Wi-Fi for an entire building, they're going to have very specific requirements, or they're going to just not use your Wi-Fi and they're going to put their own in anyways because of those security requirements. So I think it's a trust issue, it's a culture issue. The cybersecurity hitting the newspaper daily with hacking doesn't help. And so I think it's a compromise between the value you can gain by the capacity offload that's going on between a DAS and the carrier's asking us to put Wi-Fi in so that offload can happen from the cellular to the Wi-Fi, but for just their use, not for the tenant use. So we're very transparent with when a commercial, venue owner, JP Morgan, whatever, wants to do something like that, is, who's going to pick up the liability, who's going to pick up the security issues, who's going to do that. So right now it's a juggle.
I think just to jump from that point, yeah, certainly security is one point. The other point is that making voice calls over Wi-Fi can be clunky, right? I mean, it's not naturally, it's not easy. The topic, of course, the theme for today is about peering into the future, and clearly, LTE unlicensed, which there's number of news put out at Mobile World Congress, which has this promise of within, 2 years, I think, of being more real, that the chipsets, the phones will have that capability, so it is more seamless, that potentially does address some of the security concerns and the clunkiness.
Yeah, there's a mobility access to it, right, as well, right? We can drive down the street right now and your phone transfers from one cell tower to the next. You can walk on the floors, get in an elevator in a building, and if you have the DAS in the building, in general, you're not going to drop that call. Wi-Fi, however, you're in an office space, you're on that Wi-Fi, you walk out and go to the restroom, and you could drop that call because you're off the access point. So as the technology evolves and changes, that's where the threat becomes more. If you get mobility and Wi-Fi, and you do a whole building of Wi-Fi, because there's a future there in it, it could be an interesting, small cells now are needed, right? Because you got a robust Wi-Fi that's mobile.
But that's really where the benefit of having the two interaction, really from a macro point of view. Right. Because the macro network, the LTE network, the data network, that becomes the overall connectivity for all of these disparate, smaller Wi-Fi networks possibly. So when you're leaving, you hop on. Now granted, with the voice over Wi-Fi, that's not quite there yet. Right. But the data streams will. If you're not using something that is latency specific, which 90% of what we're using our devices for nowadays are not voice calls. Right. If I'm browsing a web, I really don't care if I have a little bit of a millisecond hop, between when I get off the elevator and go outside. So we're seeing all of these technologies evolve together. I think it's exciting to see all of it. And it's just, we're going to see really the market drive all of these things. And the one caution I say is that we need to not be extremely voice-centric, because it's not all about that. My daughter never uses the phone to talk on it, so.
I think it's funny to hear about clunky calls and dropped calls, and we consider that a bad thing. It's nothing like the cellular network we know now, right? not the audio perfection we enjoy over macro cell. Thank you. I'd like to open up the floor if anybody has any questions for our panel. I think we have a few minutes left. I want to give people an opportunity to jump in there.
Where'd she?
Hi. One question regarding the integration, or actually maybe that is the question. Do you see DAS and Wi-Fi as two parallel systems or integrating them? And if so, at what level can we integrate the hardware?
Well, so from a hardware level, at layer one, so your physical media, obviously you can share the sheet. There aren't that many DAS architectures. I don't think you guys can share the actual cores with any of your hardware at this point. I'm not aware of anybody that can coexist on data streams. So you can share the sheet at least. Depending on your architecture, at some point you may have to transition over to a coaxial or maybe a twisted pair architecture. With some architectures you can run fiber all the way out to the edge and really enjoy a lot of kind of shared cost and shared infrastructure.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it integrated right now. You know, it's just not there yet. It's really two networks, but we're trying to gain the synergies by having the two networks be put in together. So, like he said, the decrease in labor, or using the same conduit or whatever we're doing, but it's not to the level that it's a thought about combined network. It's really two networks.
Most of the cost is installing that first cable.
Yeah.
You need to go back and pull another cable because there's a technology evolution, or you went from SISO to MIMO. That's where your upgrade costs are. So being able to have that, put in enough fiber, put in enough coax day one, that'll really protect your investment.
And I would just add, once again, peering into the future, as we look at next generation DAS, and I don't know if we're even going to call it DAS as it becomes next generation, but I think at that point you're looking at very fiber, all fiber networks where RF and IP ride the same infrastructure, so you get those economies. Still, you're going to architect it. The antennas are going to be placed differently. You're going to design a system. The RF antennas are going to probably, in order to gain that densification, are probably going to be in different spaces. But as we look at those all fiber kind of enterprise passive optical LAN type of architectures, I think then we start talking about integration, at least on the infrastructure side.
I agree with all the comments that have been made. I mean, in terms of into the future, if it's all fiber, that's the time you'll start seeing them probably evolve towards a single network. But at the same time, right now, if you have a greenfield design, you want to put the two systems, though if they might be parallel networks, you want to do things at the same time, save cost in terms of everything, installation, testing. You want to make sure that you can do everything at the same time.
So what if it's not all fiber? Obviously, ideally, it would be, but towards your point, 2% of the in-building is covered. There's a lot to do. Aren't some people using Cat 5, Cat 6 type structures, and there's a lot of home run networks out there that you could plug into? Is that a viable short-term solution, or what's the longevity of that kind of utilization, you think?
Well, I almost think that's the way they're doing it with a Wi-Fi system. They're using the current backbone of the building to do their Wi-Fi. We're an add-on, we're another conduit that's filled with our stuff, kind of thing. I mean, when you're talking about integration, I'll give you an example. In the power world, when we put a DAS in, some of them we put in where you're literally plugging in those units up in the IDF closets on floors 6, 8, 12, right into that wall, right? And there's no real backup power for those things. The backup power and all that thought process is in the head end. We're actually have integrated our power now into the head end. So when we can run dedicated power up the conduit. So it's the same kind of philosophy here, that if we're doing all the power out of one room, why couldn't you do all the services out of the one room, kind of a managed way? So you're effectively running a integrated, heterogeneous kind of network that's Wi-Fi, power, DAS, all simultaneously to get the full effect of what the tenants want in that facility. That's kind of what it is.
Sorry, another question from the audience?
I just had a question about the Internet of Things. So from a business model, product, or infrastructure perspective, do you see yourselves having to pivot? I mean, you will do, some of you do similar things, some of you do different things. You have to pivot to take into account this potential influx of more and more data from your refrigerator and your toaster and whatever else might
Sure.
be thrown on the IoT.
Absolutely.
Internet of Things.
From a hardware point of view, we very much broadened our point of view on how we design things, the hardware that we're designing ourselves, but also other third-party hardware that can be integrated onto these infrastructures, because we can't develop everything. That's one of the nice things about a competitive marketplace, is it's going to drive innovation, and there are going to be other folks that can ride, possibly over that infrastructure. So for the Internet of Things, that's kind of why I make, while we are very voice-centric, being a DAS point of view, there are a lot of other things that need to connect to these networks. Cameras, building automation systems, door locks. These are all opportunities where you can get an ROI on that infrastructure and still deliver your DAS, still deliver your Wi-Fi. So it is really pretty exciting for me as a structured cabling engineer, an RCDD that came over into the DAS world, to really see things evolving just the same way structured cabling did a while ago.
The capacity issue is what's driving this whole market. It's not, to me, it's not coverage anymore. It's, the macro's got a problem in the major metropolitan, right? I call them the NFL cities. If you got an NFL city, you're going to have a macro problem outside. So when it started to hit 80% max on these cell towers and all these other things, guess what? We got to offload some of that to indoor. And so the carriers want to go to that building because they can offload capacity. It's not really about, it's almost not even servicing their customers. It's about servicing their customers only because the macro will work better. So in a building, we're finding the intangible results of the same thing. So where a building owner or tenants put in what they thought was the right capacity Wi-Fi system, and they did not have a DAS in it, now they're having to upgrade their Wi-Fi, upgrade their Wi-Fi, upgrade their Wi-Fi. We have intangible results now of when a DAS gets put in there, a number of those people that are now happy with their Verizon or AT&T coverage in the building are not going to the Wi-Fi. So they're freeing up capacity on Wi-Fi by staying on their cellular system. Exception, what do we all have? Data plans. And so it's still driving many people on their phones to go to the Wi-Fi, right? Because they don't want to use up their data. So as that market change and the industry adjusts, and if all of a sudden there's enough competition that data gets unlimited again, you'll see a shift again, because they don't have to go to Wi-Fi for that cost savings. So we're watching all that as we build these networks.
Yeah, and just to add on, I think IoT informs of the need to break what I like to call the infinite coverage and capacity cycle. It's how do you drive ROI? How do you do more stuff? How do you create real business models that you can literally strap on services onto these networks, that the infrastructure stays in place, and that the front and the end pieces are the things that get swapped out or added or expanded to and drive real revenue opportunities, and to do the things that these two gentlemen were just talking about, building automation. We're seeing beacon advertising technology. You want to look for a revenue and ROI model, that one could be pretty compelling.
Yeah,
if we can get past the kind of scary Big Brother aspect of it, but it's coming.
You're buying hot dogs at your seat in stadiums, and they're bringing them to your seats off your Wi-Fi. So it's.
Yeah, hello, Ed Via with EdgeConnect. I think over the last year, what we've seen is more and more landlords, hospitality industry, they're coming around to the idea that they have to have this. And I think what's missing actually, and they have control over that, over Wi-Fi. We know particularly a particular hospitality group that built some DAS and nobody came to it. I think what's missing is there is now, the challenge seems to be more getting the carriers to agree to come on board some of these systems. The 2% you mentioned, Mike, that's only been addressed, this is huge market. With BYOD and everything, everyone's getting the picture, the venue owners, landlords and things like that, that this kind of capacity, that they need to bring it. And they have control over Wi-Fi. But if they build a system today, there's no guarantee that the cellular providers are coming to it. And I think that's something we need to really start addressing as well. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, on the neutral host side, and we get venue owners that think they can make tons of money off of us building a neutral host, right? And we're going to give them a bunch of rev share and all these other things. and then we do an evaluation of their building, and it said, no, the reality is you're going to have to pay for the whole thing, because the only way to entice a carrier to come to this is you're going to have to foot the whole bill, and then we'll go and say, would you please bring some kind of RF source to this building? And that's our role to try to make that happen. It doesn't always happen, you're exactly right. And so that's why we, in our qualification of what real estate we go after, we have to be, as good as we can be, so we have a hit rate that doesn't, create credibility in the DAS industry where we go sign up a bunch of real estate and then they're all disappointed real estate owners. So you're exactly right, and so our philosophy isn't to go, sign up 1,000 buildings and then only get 100 of them built and then have that credibility problem. Our philosophy is to try to find the market where it makes sense, this capacity issue that the carriers want to do. And if we build relationships well enough in the regions with each carrier, the carrier will come to us and say, hey, Super Bowl's coming to Minneapolis in 2018. That would be a good place for you guys to go. San Francisco, is coming up this year. Houston's coming up this year. We built networks in Tampa because the Republican National Convention came in. So you have to kind of go through the philosophy of what the carriers are looking for, helping their wealthy clients, their people that stay in 4- and 5-star hotels, because they don't want that person to give up their Verizon phone and go to AT&T. So it's a very dynamic.
Those are the large ones, right? But
Yep.
I think, what about that huge
Yep.
market that's not large?
So I believe that is a cycle which is governed right now. Like if you look at the data plans, how they are evolving, we are inching towards unlimited data again. So if that keeps going forward, unlimited data will again make the carriers to focus on that part of the market, which is 98% of the market where buildings are not covered. Because if your customers are demanding it, it's going to come by your customers' demand. So they have to meet it. So that is where if the cycle keeps evolving and the pricing keeps falling and unlimited data actually becomes true on all the carriers, then you'll see that demand grow again. And that will in turn have them come back to the building owners and have their networks to provide the same capacity and coverage in those areas.
They want to come to a lot of buildings. The issue is their funding within their region of how much they can do, and so we deal with that. What will it take? And so we've got to figure out if $4 a square foot isn't the right answer. If it's $1 a square foot, in other words, portion of this build is getting commoditized. The problem is, we have labor union costs to do, and we have the equipment from these guys to buy, and it's got to be all worked into a model that can work.
And that's really, again, where kind of the mixture of these two work well. Because, the Wi-Fi, particularly if it's an enterprise-owned Wi-Fi, is self-determinate. You know what it costs, you know the timeline, you control it. That's a short runway for you. You can get that up and running. If you think ahead and design so that you can do both, that way you can have on that longer runway the DAS RF path. And you can get the best of both worlds possibly. And you're not necessarily slave to it. So if for some reason you can't get all of the carriers that you want on there, but you can get 2, you still have that gap covered with that Wi-Fi infrastructure. And obviously you're not going to get the voice part of it. But it's an evolving network, and as technologies change, you may be able to get the voice over it.
So,
Okay. We have another question back here, if that's okay.
Morning, guys. Ray Hill with Galtronics. So I've heard convergence, right? I've heard platforms, infrastructure, Internet of Things. The one thing that I'm wrestling with is the FCC rulings that have come down the last few weeks about location-based services inside of a DAS. As of, right now we know that Sally reports to the head end when in fact there could be an issue in the dorm, right? I see that as a potential driver for the carrier to get engaged in location-based types of technology, but I also see a major upgrade issue with the 100,000 DASs that have been deployed around the United States. But in my mind, I would like you guys to comment, in my mind there's a common theme here about convergence, and I think that perhaps the FCC rulings may help us move more towards the Wi-Fi cellular convergence for them to comply, A, and we can build a smart network that allows them to do that, then overlay applications on that infrastructure. Do we not now have a HETNet? The comment I'd like to hear is, how do you guys think the FCC rulings plays into this discussion?
So from one bald head to another, I appreciate you're setting me up for this, right? public safety was actually a point that I did want to touch on. I had the chance to speak with Donnie Jackson, who's the editor at Urgent Communications last week. And so Donnie was telling me about a couple weeks ago at IWCE, there were some announcements that some of the LMR, the public safety radio manufacturers, are adding Wi-Fi to the radios. And so one of the issues that a lot of us in this room are wrestling with is how do we ensure that the public safety, the first responders, that they're able to communicate effectively inside the building. If we assume, pulling back Wi-Fi, the importance and value of Wi-Fi to the network, Wi-Fi then becomes a very interesting way that, as Donnie said, kind of turns things on their ear in being able to successfully enable the public safety, the LMR radios that are equipped with Wi-Fi to work so that the public safety guys can do their job better. In terms of location, E911 location, Wi-Fi once again is one of those leading technologies that we're looking at as to how do we pinpoint not only the X and Y, but also the Z coordinate of where you and I, as the general public, where the fire guys, where the first responders are going to be able to find us. So Wi-Fi plays a very interesting component in solving for that, changes a lot of things.
I just don't know, is my answer. I mean, there's a lot of confusion. The whole net neutrality and the rest of this that's going on right now has caused, just a lot of confusion in what's possible and where markets might change, and have you impacted the carrier's ability. I mean, they spent billions for these FCC licensed frequencies, and now they're saying you can't, you need to level the playing field for what you can make off of those frequencies. So I feel for them as well, as they go through their business models trying to figure out what's going to really happen here. I think we do have to do public safety, and it should be included in things. And I don't know how many of you are vendors. How many of you are like building owners or users? We generally at these conferences don't get many of them, even though we all invite them, right? I mean, I do. But it is what it, so everyone understands that a public safety network, you're going to have 50 firemen on that network. You're not going to have 3,000 people in the building on that network. So that it can be spread out, right? There can be less access points. It's a coverage thing. It's not a capacity thing. So that network should be fairly easy, less expensive to build, and it really is the right thing to do. We've all lived 911 and all the other things where people got lost. So we've tried to figure out ways, how do we integrate that into our cell? Again, we get back to, guess what? Liability. So we own, design, maintain, we're responsible for the DAS network. The DAS network is an amenity. It's not guaranteed to be your safety network. Therefore, the liability is limited, right? Zero, almost. You put a public safety network in, you guarantee that 800 megahertz or the 450 megahertz is going to fly across it, and the fireman is going to be able to use it. Different liability. Fire happens, he goes in there, it doesn't work. Big deal. So our litigation, as it is in our country, makes it hard for us to figure out how to do that and to take that risk. So it's just another game, and that's the same thing with Wi-Fi, with this hacking and all the other things. So all those considerations make the business model, the risk, cost, benefit thing, very interesting to deal with.
Ray, I think to your question on location-based services, obviously the current hybrid fiber coax architecture, that's going to be a little bit difficult to do when you're looking at particularly a single amplifier feeding 10, 20, 30 antennas. You get no spatial resolution. The Wi-Fi architecture, they've really they're ahead on that. They've got the location-based capabilities. And some of these smaller, really active antenna type of architectures, those are going to be the ones that are going to be able to do it, but it's not out there yet. So, build it and they will come. It's an exciting time in our industry, and as these challenges come up, you're going to see various vendors and folks rise to develop those solutions.
We work with partners on the Wi-Fi side, and the location-based services, remember that network's a lot more expensive than just a basic Wi-Fi because of how they have to work out, so smart malls, right? You may have heard of that concept, right? Because the mall owners want to know what door are they walking in, where are they hanging out and getting on? Are they hanging out near the Starbucks? If they are, and there's a Best Buy right next door, can I push a coupon for Best Buy while they're standing there at the Starbucks? That's the kind of location-based stuff that is economical. But that Wi-Fi costs more than a basic, just give them a Wi-Fi, in a common space kind of thing. So it's there though, right? We're doing it in sports entertainment and everything else, so.
All right.
Excellent. Unless there's any more questions, I think we are out of time. Thank you very much to our panelists. It was very enjoyable. I appreciate it.
I need 6 8x10s, 3 4x7s.
Oh, in wallet size.
Walt says to my kids.